I woke up to this morning. Well, that's not quite right, because to say I woke up would mean that I had actually slept, and this has actually been going on all night, so yeah, haven't slept too much. Captain is utterly and completely obsessed with catching flies with his mouth. That's me that he's climbing on right now. There are a lot of flies. I think maybe he's got a little touch of the doggy OCD. Today I'm going to talk about the wild horses, or the wild ponies. Technically, a pony is an equine animal that is 14 hands, 2 inches or shorter. Most of these guys fit the bill. I mean, look at that guy. He's tiny. Assateague horse, Chincoteague pony. What's the difference? Really just depends which side of the fence you're on. There is a fence that runs through the island of Assateague, and on one side is Maryland, and on the other side is Virginia. And on the Maryland side is the National Seashore, which is where we're located, and the Assateague horses live in the National Seashore. They're managed as part of the seashore by the U.S. Park Service. They don't have natural origins in this area. They were domesticated originally, but they've adapted so incredibly well to the surroundings that basically they are part of the place now. On the other side is Virginia. On the Virginia side is the Chincoteague Wildlife Refuge, and that's where the Chincoteague ponies live. But they don't live as part of the refuge. They live on rented grazing land, basically, that's rented by their owners, which are the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Department from the town of Chincoteague. The fire department owns the Chincoteague ponies. Nobody owns the ones on the other side. See, that makes for a very different lifestyle. See, here, because they're considered part of the environment, there's very little intervention. Here's an example. Population has to be managed in both cases, but on the Assateague side, the population is managed through contraception, which is put into a dart and shot into the mares. They're not rounded up, to have this done to them by a veterinarian. They're just shot with it and go about their business. That's basically the only medical intervention they receive is contraception, unless occasionally one gets hit by a car, and then they get medical attention. But for the most part, yeah, you get sick, you die. Circle of life on this side of the fence. On the other side of the fence, the Chincoteague ponies, they see a vet regularly because the way that their population is managed is through a big auction that happens every year at an event called pony penning. It's a big tourist event where all the ponies in the refuge are rounded up, and then they swim across the channel to Chincoteague, where they march down Main Street, and then they go to this auction and all the foals are sold. Now, in the process of doing that, they all get checkups. They have to have veterinary care or else they couldn't be sold. And that's how the Chincoteague Fire Department pays its bills, and that's how the little horsies over there live. Pony penning itself dates back to the 1700s, when farmers would have horses that they would graze on the island. They would reclaim them by swimming them across. People came and watched this because what could be cuter, right, than a whole bunch of ponies swimming across the water? In 1925, the town of Chincoteague voted to let the fire department have control of the horses and do this carnival because they just really needed new equipment. They'd had a couple of big fires that had devastated the town because they didn't have the equipment to handle it. So the first one was a great fundraiser. They had the carnival and they sold 15 foals. The next year, they sold a few more foals. By 1937, they were buying up ponies from all the surrounding farms to mate with the wild ones because they wanted more foals to sell, because they were making so much money selling these foals. The book Misty of Chincoteague came out in 1947, and that further popularized the pony penning event. So a lot of people come to see the pony penning. It's a pretty big deal at this point. Proponents of pony penning argue that the ponies are better cared for than the Assateague horses because they have veterinary care, because there's a pen they can be put in to protect them and the tourists. The Assateague horses, on the other hand, can go wherever they want. The other thing is the Chincoteague ponies are fed hay in the winter, while the Assateague horses have to forage for themselves year-round. But during most of the year, both horses are eating the same thing, which is this basically seagrass that is not very nutritious, which is why when you see them, they're always eating. They have to eat constantly to get enough nutrition. And then the grass that they're eating is so salty, they have to drink twice as much water as other horses, which is why they have those little bloaty bellies that they have.
The National Humane Society protests the swim and sail, which has resulted in a few accidental deaths. They say foals are removed too early, and they accuse the fire department of running a foal factory. Well, they do have an awfully nice setup for a volunteer fire department in a town of 3,000, I'll say that.
One thing I do know is which life I'd rather have. Let me be an Assateague pony, horse, whatever. I mean, I like to swim, but I'd like to swim without a whip over me, and if I had a foal, I don't think I'd want it to be taken away like that. It really doesn't matter much what anybody thinks, though, because people keep coming to see it, and I don't think Pony Penny's going away anytime soon, or ever. So where did these horses come from? That is also different depending on which side of the fence you're on. The Chincoteague Fire Department and everybody on that side says that the horses came from a Spanish shipwreck, that they swam ashore and rescued themselves. Park Service dismisses that as a myth, and they say that the horses are descended from horses that were put out here in the 1600s by farmers to avoid fencing laws and taxes. Okay, naturally you kind of assume that the more mundane answer is probably the right one. The other one sounds a little too romantic, but when you really dig in there, what the U.S. Park Service is saying does not make a whole lot of sense. First of all, horses, now still, but back then especially, were valuable resources and were very unlikely to be abandoned. It's not like we're talking about some remote island here. There are places where Assateague's only 100 yards away. So if you dig into the records at the courthouses in the surrounding towns, what you find out is that the horses that were grazing on Assateague were taxed. In 1749, there was a huge storm that caused a 15-foot tsunami that went 2 miles inland, like into the forests. And after that, it was reported that only one of the horses that were grazing on the island lived out of the 60 that were out here. So what about the shipwreck story? Does that ring any truer? The original story talks about a shipwreck in 1520, and I think you can kind of rule that out because, like I said, there was this storm in 1749. Could it be a different shipwreck, like maybe later? I mean, that's got to be rare, right? There can't be that many shipwrecks. Well, this is a shipwreck map. Every one of those black boaty looking things is a shipwreck. So yeah, there's plenty of shipwrecks to choose from. There was a ship that was named La Galga, which is the Greyhound, that was accompanying 6 other ships from Cuba to Spain, ran aground on a sandbar in Assateague in 1750. So that's 1 year after the big storm. Okay, so the records show that this ship ran aground and then was stuck there, and the locals just looted the boat over and over again, and then eventually another storm came and buried the ship in sand. That's the recorded history of that ship. Most of what we know about that shipwreck comes from a description written by the captain of the ship that is in the Maryland archives, which were published in 1808. And in that document, he is very specific about where the ship is located. He says it was 2 ship lengths from the Virginia-Maryland line. Was the ship carrying horses? I mean, it wasn't listed that it was carrying horses, it was listed that it was carrying soldiers. And at the time, soldiers would have been traveling with their horses. By the early 1800s, there's talk of beach horses. These horses that don't look like the horses in town. They're much smaller. In the 1990s, 1996, this guy, Ben Benson, is actually looking for a different ship. He's looking for a ship called the Juno, which went down with supposedly millions of dollars. He gets a permit from the state of Virginia to look for the Juno. And all of a sudden he announces that he's not only found the Juno, he's found La Galga. He finds 2 ships. The thing is, he does legitimately find 2 ships, but the problem is you can't identify what ships they are. And then this completely unthinkable thing happens. The country of Spain suddenly says, hey, we didn't abandon those ships. Those are our ships. You got to give us everything you find on the ship. And even weirder, they're represented in the court case by the U.S. Attorney's Office under Janet Reno. So the U.S. Attorney is representing a foreign government against the state of Virginia, which is all very unusual. And what ends up happening, it goes through a couple of permutations, but what ends up happening is that the judge awards these ships to Spain. Now, all of this happens without anybody even being able to confirm that these are the Spanish ships, the Juno and La Galga. Right after the court case, the government of Spain loaned everything, that all the things that were found relating to the shipwreck to the U.S. government, and it's now on display in the visitor center at Assateague Island. Meanwhile, there's this other guy named John Amrine who has a completely different theory. Not about where the horses came from, but about where La Galga might be. So if this pans out, I might be digging a little deeper into that. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about that right now. In 1991, the Journal of Wildlife Management did a study of the genetics of the Assateague horses, and they found a link to a breed called the Pasofino, which is a breed that was brought to the New World by the Spanish, and it's known for this particularly weird gait. Supposedly, people that know Pasofinos see the resemblance. I didn't see it until I saw this video. Some of these guys are kind of doing a Pasofino number. So did these guys come on La Galga, and are they descended from Pasofino horses? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm not an expert. And if you're looking for some more history, why don't you watch this video? This is my least watched video, and I think it's probably because it's 4th of July, but the information is timeless. So show it some love, and I'll see you guys the next time.